Hi, welcome to today's edition of Theology Thursdays, where we look at the readings for the following Sunday and discuss how they fit in with each other and how they fit in with our lives in between Sunday Mass. I'm here with Laura and Sophie and her little baby Eleanor, who's so adorably cute. And we're talking about the readings for this coming Sunday, which is the third Sunday of Lent. And the readings are from Exodus, first reading talking about the Ten Commandments and God giving the people the Ten Commandments. And then 1 Corinthians, where Paul talks about how we hold Christ crucified and how that idea of Christ being crucified is a stumbling block to the Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles, but we see it as the wisdom and the power of God. And then the final reading, the Gospel, is a reading that I like a lot, where it's like the only time Jesus is ever mad. And he goes into the temple and he upturns all the tables and gets all mad at the people that are selling stuff there. So those are the three readings. I think a lot of people, or anybody who's watching this, has probably already heard those readings, so we're not going to read them. But they reminded me of a story that I actually heard a couple days ago on the radio. And the story went something like this. There was a guy from the city who wanted fresh cow's milk, right? So obviously he was in the city. There were no cows around. So he goes to the country and he finds a farmer, a dairy farmer, and he says, "Hey, I'd really like to rent your cow, and maybe for like a month or so, and I'll take really good care of it, and I'll give it back to you in great condition, and I'll definitely pay you for the time." And so the farmer says, "Do you know how to milk a cow?" And he says, "Yeah, I looked it up on YouTube." And so the farmer rents him this cow for the month. And so the guy from the city goes off with his cow. And he comes back about like a week and a half later, and he's quite upset. And he says, "Hey, I need the money back. I took really good care of the cow. I made sure it was eating really well, and I didn't even milk it a lot. I only milked it when I needed milk, and the milk ran out. So the cow's broken. I need my money back." And the farmer kind of laughs a little bit and says, "Yeah, you have no idea how to milk a cow." And the farmer proceeded to explain how if you want to keep getting milk from the cow, you have to keep milking the cow even when you don't necessarily need the milk. And the guy from the city couldn't understand that. It seemed really stupid to him. And so he walked away kind of defeated and deflated. And the reason this story came to mind when I was reading these readings is because oftentimes we're the guy from the city. And in the second reading, 1 Corinthians, Paul's saying that the Jews and the Gentiles are the guy from the city. They're looking at Christ. They're looking at Jesus on the cross and saying, "That's dumb. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would this person, if he really was God, let himself be killed, be crucified? And how can that possibly lead to anything good?" And yet we're told by Paul that Jesus on the cross is the exemplification of God's power and his wisdom. And how many times have we seen the Ten Commandments, or have we been told by an authority figure of some sort not to do something, or to do something, or how to do something, and it doesn't make sense to us? It kind of like seems like they have no idea what they're doing, and we go ahead and do our own thing. So it looks like if we're going to assume that the two guys in the story, the farmer and the city guy, are smart people and are people that have a general amount of common sense, why would they arrive at two totally different conclusions? And it seems that they were using two different paradigms to inform their thinking. The guy from the city was using the idea that, if you have a bucket or a container with a liquid in it and you want to keep that liquid as long as possible, then you only use a little bit. You use it sparingly, and it'll last. And the guy in the farm was coming at it from the point of view of, the cow's not a bucket. The cow's not a container. The cow is this living thing that provides the milk, not all at once, but with continued use and continued care. And so they're using two totally different sets of truths to arrive at the same thing. And that's kind of what it seems that God's telling us in these readings, that through the Ten Commandments, and through really kind of not just knowing them, knowing what they are, a lot of us know what they are, but really through meditating on them and thinking about them and reflecting on them and reflecting on our own lives, that we can see some really, really great, important, and very vital truths to our own joy and our own health and well-being in our lives. And if we don't do that, if we come at the Christian life and if we come at Jesus on the cross with the eyes of cynicism and skepticism, then we're gonna achieve, or we're gonna arrive at a totally different set of conclusions when we look at Christians and we look at Christianity and Jesus himself. So with that in mind, maybe the biggest question I have in my head is would we, as 21st century Christians, 21st century Catholics, would we believe Jesus when he said what he says in the gospel? You know, if you tear down this temple, which was his body that he was talking about, if you tear down this temple, I'm going to raise it up in 3 days. Would we have the right filter and the right set of truths in order to believe that? Or would we not be able to and kind of have to walk away saying that's insane and that's impossible and no one could do that? So that's kind of, I don't know, that was my kind of reflection on the readings today.
I think if we did not know the Messiah, we probably would do exactly the same thing. I think it has, I mean, we're not superior to anybody, and it's only because we've been blessed to have our upbringing, to have our formation, and to experience the God of living and know and the scriptures, that we could possibly even fathom that this could be true, because to understand it defies, I think, the human mind.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you completely. Like I think about myself right now, and I think about the things that I hear or whatever on the internet, even like, you know, you read stories, people post things on Facebook, and I think that didn't happen. You know, like there's no way that that actually happened in real life. You know, and I think that if I heard a crazy-looking angry man in the middle of my church throwing things and breaking things and saying, you know, if you tear this down, I'll bring it back in 3 days, I would say, somebody call the police. This man needs to be apprehended. You know, he's clearly destroying property and disrespecting people, and that's not acceptable. You know, so I could totally see myself falling in line with everybody who didn't get it. And I'd like to think that, you know, the Holy Spirit would inspire me, and, you know, I would be open-minded, and I would be able to be like, you know, like Peter and say, you are the Messiah. But I do not think that I realistically, probably not. I probably would not be there. So I wish I could be. I hope I will be one day one of those people who could, you know, get it, but who knows?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I hope the same thing too. You know, I think for me at least, that's what I'm getting out of these readings. Like, for me, the point is to ask myself that question: what would it take me to be that person? What would it take me to have that kind of faith and that kind of openness to believe that crazy person in the church overturning the tables, you know, has something that the priests don't. And I think, as I was thinking about that, I kind of think about children and about people that are uneducated. And, you know, we've often heard Jesus saying that, you know, blessed are the poor, blessed are the children, blessed are the people that don't have anything. And I think part of the reason that they're blessed, and part of the reason that you can find Jesus in the poor and in the children and in the innocent is because their cups are totally empty, right? And they have room for mystical things. They have room for everyone. And I mean, so many more things to them are a mystery. And I think it's like so easy to become cynical. The more information you know, if that information isn't first founded or grounded in a childlike awe of the world around us, you know. And so for me, I think that kind of translates to, no matter what I learn, or no matter how big I get, you know, as far as my education goes, I need to first maintain that childlike sense of, holy cow, this is amazing. You know, everything around me is amazing.
Yeah, I agree with you, especially observing my daughters, and how willing they are to accept some things that I wouldn't accept right off the bat. People telling them things that they, are more open to understanding or more open to just intuitively being more loving generally than I am. And I think that is definitely a lesson. I think that's definitely some of the things that Jesus meant when he said we need to be like children. Because truly, like, well, Eleanor much less because she's a baby, but Felicity really, I see I definitely see her extending this love and this understanding and this willingness to just be open and accept people in a way that I definitely wouldn't. And I sometimes, she gives me a reality check of, like, that's what it means to be Christian, really, is to be the way she is. Hey, buddy. Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's what it means to be Christian, like that, just like that. Being open and honest about how you're feeling, Eleanor. There you go.
Yeah.
Totally do it.
Her mouth hurts. Sorry.
No, not at all. That's great. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that, or what thoughts struck you as you were looking at the readings?
One of the things that I never really paid attention to, possibly, as I was going over the reading in Exodus and the Ten Commandments for the millionth time, but in the first commandment, where God says, "I am the only God, and I'm a jealous God," right? And then He says that He will punish someone who does not observe and follow Him as the only God to the third and fourth generation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That bothers me. That bothers me a lot. But then the very next line is, "But He will show mercy to the 1,000th generation of those who follow Him." So I thought, whoa, 4 generations bad, 1,000 mercy, that doesn't jive, right? It doesn't jive, because if you're punishing the next generation who doesn't follow to the 4th generation, but you're also giving mercy for 1,000 generations because the great-great-great-great-grandparents did, it looks like mercy will win out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of like takes us back to last week's readings with like Abraham sacrificing his son, right? And Jeremy was on here last week, and he was talking about how not necessarily all the Jews, or in the Jewish culture, but there's one of the Jewish thoughts of that reading is that Abraham failed. He failed the test. Like, he didn't challenge God when God said to do this. And it's interesting that this week Paul talks about that. He says, look, Christ on the cross, Christ dying, is foolishness, is a stumbling block to the Jews. The Jews don't get it, right? They didn't understand. They were looking for this mighty Savior. They were looking for this Savior that was going to conquer in a military fashion and those things that we've heard. And they didn't get that. They saw some guy who let himself be killed, just like Abraham, could have very easily been the guy that let his son be killed, or actually who killed his son, who offered his son up. And yet Abraham didn't. Abraham had the faith, and that's exactly what happened, right? God blessed Abraham's generations over and over again unto like the number of stars in the sky. And I think you were saying you had a problem with the idea that God would punish up to the 4th generation or whatever, right? For those who had other gods beside him, right? But I think that's kind of like and for me, I mean, that seems really vindictive. And then I think, that seems to be like the natural consequence. When you think of, what am I going to hand down to my kids? Am I going to hand down a legacy of following the authority of God, of following the truth of Christ and Christ on the cross, like Paul says? Or am I going to hand down the legacy of being cynical and being skeptical? Because that's going to affect them. That's going to affect their kids and their kids. So it seems like it would be the natural thing. And likewise, if we do follow God, that our descendants will do the same thing. I don't know. It's interesting how that works out.
You just blew my mind. You just blew my mind completely. I had never thought of it that way. And I really like that. I really like that. The natural consequence of not putting God first and centering him in your family is that up to the fourth generation, or even further probably, you have a people who don't know God. And that's kind of like their own punishment themselves, these people who choose not God. And that kind of follows with some of the modern teachings of what hell is, which is just a separation from God, right? And that I think that really fits. That's a really good way to look at that. Thank you, Nathan.
You are welcome. No, I think so. I mean, it seems to make sense to me. Because if God is not this vindictive being, and I think that any God that would be is not a God of the but but if this God that loves us and that we love would save us, there's got to be a reason, and it just seems that God is in God's grace and is in the natural way of things, and so it seems that that's one way that could be true.
That makes a lot of sense to me.
And I think, as far as the punishment aspect, it makes sense. The things that we do, good or bad, all have natural consequences. And if the people of the Old Testament interpreted bad things that happened to them as punishment, then okay, I mean, that's an interpretation. I think that we've grown from that. But then I want to believe that if God is merciful, that is because God is merciful, and not just because it's natural consequences that when you are doing the right thing, things go well for you,
Right.
I'm not sure how that meshes together, but it makes sense. Yeah, it's logical that we pass on whatever it is we do, and that becomes our legacy, the way we live and what our children see. And you will have good fathers, good parents with children that go away, astray, and you have other parents that are not, and children become remarkable, adults as they grow and somehow find God in their own way. So the cycles, the cycles can be broken, and hopefully, I don't know how that goes on, because if you're blessing the third generation, and that third generation is against God, I'm not sure how it fits either.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think awesome. Go ahead. What, Sophie?
No, I just said yeah.
Huh.
Just agree.
Yeah, I think part of it's not to necessarily take it to not to necessarily get hung up on the literal
numbers. Yeah.
Of it. I mean, and keep in mind that Abraham's descendants were blessed, and he's just blessed with descendants. But by no means, when you look at like Matthew, and it has like the lineage between Abraham and Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were like rapists and murderers and thieves and liars and all the in addition with all these like saintly, really good people, there was this whole mix. It was a very real coming together of descendants of people,
Mm-hmm.
and by no means was it like everybody was perfect that came from Abraham, but just the idea that they were blessed, they were part of this great lineage of people.
Which I think really says that God loves all his children, no matter who we are and what we do, and that love is still there, and his mercy is still there for everyone.
Oh, sure. And I don't know, and I don't know. I'm thinking about David too. Like David, this really beloved son of God, at this one point in his life, totally turned away from God and was with Bathsheba and killed Bathsheba's husband so she could be with her, and basically did the opposite of what Abraham did, right? And he was actually punished in that way, right? Where Nathan came to David and said, you've done this thing, and you're gonna live, but what I think his child had died, right? His son was taken basically and killed for what he had done. And so in a very real way, like his offspring was totally got the brunt or the bad end of his actions.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that we also, have to keep in mind the Old Testament kind of view of all of these things, right? And the culture of the people that wrote these stories and what they're trying to accomplish by writing these stories, you know, and back then, you know, people, the idea of morality coming from God himself, you know, like God is this policeman, sort of, is the way a lot of people thought. And I feel like now we're in a different place, and so these stories of you know, policeman, big mean daddy God doesn't really jive with the way we see it, you know. But I think that I don't know, like.
No. I definitely think the imagery is different. Like we've kind of grown out of the imagery of or we need to grow out of the imagery of God as this policeman and God as this person that's going to punish us when we don't do what He wants.
Right.
But I think the message though is very very true. Like, and I think of like a lot of my friends, you know, who, I mean, you know, no parents are perfect. Nobody is perfect. But I think of, you know, some people I know whose parents, you know, really did a number on them, you know, and then you look at their lives and you look at how their lives are suffering because of what they were handed down by their parents and by their parents' parents and by their parents' parents' parents, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of that, the flip side, and I don't think it's necessarily God looking at them and punishing them, but again, kind of like the natural, it's the way God kind of made the world work, made humanity work. You know, what we do to our kids is gonna stick with them. You know, and the great things we do are gonna stick with them, and the bad things we're gonna do are gonna stick with them, and really kind of, I think it comes down to if we're doing the best that we can with the faith that we have, I think we'll be blessed for that, really. And if we're really not, because, you know, some people don't, some people do, some people go for the greedy way, and they go for the thing that's going to make them feel the best and the thing that's the easiest.
Right.
And not as a judgment, but it totally affects their kids, yeah.
I agree 100%.
So, yeah.
Go ahead, Sophie.
No, please. I was just going to say Jake just got here.
Hello. I was out in the snow.
Hi.
Very nice.
I was looking at the Psalm, and you know, so many times we hear people talking about the Ten Commandments as being a whole, just a list of nothing but what not to do, what not to do most of the time. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the Psalm and you see just the opposite message, you know, your law is perfect. It refreshes us. It is trustworthy. It gives us life. It is right, pure, clear, true, and it is precious than gold, more precious than gold and sweeter than honey. And for a while, for a long time, I think I had, I couldn't understand what that meant until I started to understand, I think, some of what Nathan was saying about, you know, these are just natural consequences. The way you live brings you consequences. So if you look at those Ten Commandments and you look and you say, well, if you live this way, if you really, besides the what not to do, if you don't steal and all that stuff, that's kind of logical. You don't get into all kinds of trouble. But beyond that, if you really hold God as the center of your life, if you really love God and neighbor the way the law says, the way the Ten Commandments really command us, then life is wonderful, you know, and then it makes sense. And so the law, when taken wisely, when understood and interpreted wisely, and then applied to one's life to the extent that we can as humans, brings us life, brings us the joy, brings us all the good stuff that we tend to look for in materialism and other things in our society.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the Ten Commandments, the way that they're presented in the Old Testament and the way they're presented in the New Testament, is a really good indication of like what Sophie was talking about. In the Old Testament, the people were like children, like we are as children, you know, and they needed to you know, you don't explain things to a child. You don't use abstract language to a child. You say, don't do that, and don't do that, and keep away from that. And that was the language that worked for them. And in the New Testament, they've heard that for hundreds of years, and they're ready to be told, okay, all of those things, it's about love. So love God, love your neighbor. If you can love God and love your neighbor, do that. And then it's like positive wording.
Right.
And I think we're still kind of stuck on that though. I think as a people we need to really go into both of those, see them as the same thing, the nots and the do nots and the do's, and really reflect on what it means to not how am I not doing those things. Oh, I don't have to worry about the fourth commandment. I don't have to worry about the fifth because I'm not killing anybody. I'm not lying. But like, what are the deeper meanings of those things? What are the deeper meanings of love God, love your neighbor, and really trying to figure out how best to follow those in everything that we're doing. Which again, I think seems really ridiculous to many people. You know, a lot of people would say, "Why would you do that?" A lot of skeptics would say, "Why would you?" Or cynics would say, "Why would you do that? Like, why would you live your life trying to please this invisible being in the sky?" You know, and they're so full of their own. Their cup is so full, they have no room for the humility that's really inside the commandments and the law of God.
When you say their cup is so full, I think of something totally different. I would rather phrase it as basically, if you don't follow God, you declare yourself a God, and you somehow think that you're going to be able to do all these wonderful things and have this wonderful life all on your own. And of course, that's when we seem to fall flat on our face. And so that humility is definitely essential, because without it, we cannot acknowledge that invisible authority and
well, and I think when you have that humility, I think the authority becomes very visible. You know, I think, and just that idea that your cup is always full. Your cup is either full with God or it's full with yourself, and either you maintain that your authority is something beyond you, or that you are your own authority, like you're saying.
Yeah, I really like the Ten Commandments. It's not really. I mean, it's not something that, as Catholics, we don't treat them the same way a lot of Protestants do, where we memorize them and like obsess over them, I think. But I do really, really like them, because I think that they basically sum up the life of a perfect Christian if you think about what each one really means. And like you were saying about the deeper meanings behind each commandment, you know, do not kill. Yes, it does mean do not go out there and physically kill somebody. But I think it also can, you know, mean like do not murder someone's reputation, and do not, you know, there's like a lot of options that like shades of gray, like what Jeremy was talking about several months ago when he was talking about how you teach children in black and white and then later they mature into get into the shades of gray. And I think that the Ten Commandments are shades of gray, really. And that a lot of cynics don't see them that way, and so they can't understand why they are important. Because to them it's like, well, yeah, duh, don't kill someone. You need your invisible friend to tell you not to kill somebody, you know, which is actually an argument that I've had an atheist tell me before. And really that's not the case. My morality is not based on God. It is informed by God. It is guided by God. You know, I don't need God to tell me that killing is wrong, but because I love God, I do not want to kill. It's kind of like a very, I don't know, there's a line, right? So.
And even beyond that, I think there is a time when it takes God to tell us what not to do, because our human tendencies and our passions are so strong. So when you see injustice, how many people would say, go ahead and kill him?
Yeah.
Because someone who's all evil, right? And that's the death penalty. And yet, that's not what we're about.
I agree.
And that is the Ten Commandments informing us, no, that's not what, you know, how God works. That's not how we're supposed to work.
I agree 100% with that.
And also, again, not to get, or knowing how not to get caught up in the language, the specific language of, you know, thou shalt not kill. You know, I mean, someone might who's caught up in the language of it, you know, might you know, step on a cockroach, say, or hit a bird with their car, say, or whatever, and really feel a sense of guilt, you know, and when really the point of it is like, don't have the intention of harming people. That's the essence of it. Like, don't murder with the intention of harming people, you know, and all of a sudden that kind of like handles a bunch of shades of gray, because that deals with self-defense, that deals with killing for food, you know, that deals with a whole range of things, you know, accidents that unfortunately happen, and it also deals with, you know, sometimes I, you know, want to strangle this person, you know, what do I do when I do that, you know, so really kind of, again, reflecting on it and figuring out what it means in the given moment.
Yeah.
So cool. Why don't we end it there? And again, I think for me, like, it's a matter of, the readings this week are a matter of me asking myself, what's feeding the skeptic in me and the cynic in me, and what can I be doing, especially this Lent, to bring those things down and to really kind of build up my own childlike sense of wonder and awe and openness to the mystical things of life, and the things that God has to teach me. How do I empty my cup so that He can fill it? So with that, I'll say have a great week, and we'll see you next week.